Lashana Tova, Julio. It's nice to see you, and nice to have a little bit of a chance to talk about this disease that we're living in as we're entering our new year.
Thank you. Lashana Tova to you as well, Richard, and greetings to all the members of Betham. It's a privilege to be here.
This is an amazing time for our community, and I guess we're supposed to be representing a couple of the important areas of our community, the business community and the scholarship community.
Yes, indeed. This has been unlike any year, I think, in every walk of life. But certainly for the university, as it approaches its centennial, I'm sure there's been nothing like this over the almost 100 years of its existence. It's been truly an amazing year that has forced us to find new ways and to be adaptive and respond in creative manners that I don't think we had thought about fully before the pandemic. So it is a topic of great importance. And when the pandemic is finally brought under control, and it will be brought under control at some point, probably next year, but I think the aftershocks will last for a long time. It's a major event of our lifetimes.
Yeah, and I think the same thing can be said of the business community. This has been a really terrible time for a lot of people. It's difficult for both of us in our business and academic lives, but there are an awful lot of people out there who are having their children at home and having to school them, lost their jobs. I mean, this is just terrible time in our community especially for small businesses who just have to come to a complete halt. I think we're fortunate at the university. Who would have imagined that at the time of a pandemic, we would have a president who is both a PhD in public health and a medical doctor in public health. So it's good background for it.
Yes, this is the fifth pandemic that I have lived through in some decision-making position. But I have to tell you, this is unlike anything else that I have gone through. I went through SARS and through the last real pandemic, which was H1N1, and of course the ongoing pandemic of HIV/AIDS, which has been on for almost 40 years now. But this is truly unlike anything I've seen. Bill Gates called it the once in a century pandemic, and I think he is right. Both because of the extent of the public health emergency, the complexity of the virus, and then all the other repercussions, particularly in the economy, the suffering that you were alluding to, that it has brought to countless families. And then the fact that it also has coincided with a growing social unrest, and certainly in the United States, the reawakening of a lot of the underlying discussions around racial justice. This confluence of three crises, a public health emergency, an economic emergency, and a social crisis where some witnessing protests and others and other manifestations are truly unprecedented. And for us as a university, it's posed the challenges on the three fronts. We need to cope with the reality of a public health emergency. Also be mindful that we are a private university. We need to face the financial consequences, but we're also mindful about our role in the community. University of Miami is the second largest nonprofit employer. So the second largest after the county government in the nonprofit sector, we're the second largest. And therefore, decisions we make as to whether, for example, to reopen or not, have a huge impact on our students and faculty and staff. And of course, their safety and health is our number one priority, but it also has repercussions on the entire community.
I think one of the interesting things is how this is going to affect us long term. You talked about this as a pandemic, but it's an unusual one. The characteristics of this disease make it particularly interesting, if you will, because it is quite infectious. So a lot of people get it, but the fatality rate is actually quite low. And the other thing is the fact that so many of the people who get it are asymptomatic. So the normal things that we do to prevent the spread of a disease don't work so well. We aren't doing the kinds of social distancing that you would do. So if you take something like Ebola, it was a terrible disease with a horrible fatality rate, tens of times the fatality rate of COVID-19. But people understood that, and the symptoms were immediate, and therefore it was able to test, isolate, and control very quickly. In this country, we started with initially very low testing. Finally, testing is really coming up to a significant level, and it looks like it's moving forward. But that difficulty in testing, that fact that so many people didn't have symptoms, so it allowed it to spread in a way that we're not used to seeing it, even in the other pandemics that we've had. So I think this has had commercial and consequences on business and private entities and universities and government, unlike anything we've seen before. And I don't think we'll see exactly the same thing ever again.
No, you're right. The big challenge with this virus is exactly the extent of asymptomatic transmission. If you look certainly to Ebola, which in addition require very intimate contact for transmission, this particular strain of coronavirus is airborne transmission, which is very easy. You just need to be talking and you can actually transmit the disease. But if you look at SARS, another airborne disease caused by a different coronavirus, you had to be very sick to be contagious. So by that time, you were most likely confined in a hospital. The problem here is the large number of people who look and feel okay, and they are inadvertently spreading the disease in the community. And that's been the challenge with the coronavirus that produces the disease we call COVID-19. It's that level of asymptomatic transmission. It is contagious. It is easily transmitted through airborne transmission, but it is the asymptomatic transmission that poses such a challenge. And the only way you deal with that is with the measures we've heard: extensive testing. And as you said, unfortunately, that got delayed. And because it is so contagious, you quickly get into an exponential curve. So, you know, one person infects 2, and 2, 4, and 4, 8, and 8, 16. And even a delay of a few weeks then becomes a huge number of cases. By then you're overwhelmed and you have no remedy but to do the kind of generalized shutdown. That's not the standard way we operate in public health. In public health, we typically are able to test people who turn positive, trace their contacts, and then isolate or quarantine only those individuals. But this got into what's called community transmission, to the point that we could just do so-called mitigation, which is to ask everyone to stay at home. And that is what had the huge effect on the economy.
And you're right. It's a little disappointing when we started this back in February and March. The testing that we were able to do was literally a few dozen a day. That was all we were able to do. The testing is such an important part of containing a disease like this. The fact that we're now up to 700,000 or 800,000 tests a day is really a good step forward. And the new tests that they're talking about, the lateral flow test, like Abbott has just announced, and that has been approved by the FDA, they're talking about coming out with 50 million tests a month starting as early as October. And when you can do that kind of testing at a cost of like $5 a test, and with getting answers in 15 minutes, that will really help us deal with this disease and do the kinds of things that public health normally does: track it, trace it, and only isolate the people that need to be isolated, instead of isolating all of society, which is devastating to so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. And because we've had to spend all this time developing the tests and the vaccine and the drugs, the three big technologies that are going to see us through this, we've had to rely on the soft side of public health. The hard side is the one that's driven by technology. But technology takes time, and I hope one of the lessons from this pandemic is we gotta have those platforms ready to go. As soon as you sequence the genome of the next virus, there will be a next pandemic. For us in public health, it's not if, it's when it happens. You have the technology, the platforms, and you're ready to go as soon as you sequence the genome with the tests, the drugs, and the vaccines. One thing that happened in this pandemic, which has been my frustration and those of my colleagues in global public health, is we have these episodes in the past. We had H1N1, we had SARS, and everyone pays a lot of attention, but as soon as the emergency is over, we go back to the way things were.
And I think people are going to do that a lot here too. Hopefully the public health response will be better. Hopefully we'll act more quickly on things like testing and we'll have more preparation for it. I think one of the things that's likely to come out of this is that everybody I know is traumatized. We are so lucky. People like you and I, we have nothing to complain about. We're isolated and we find that very frustrating, but we have homes, we have jobs, we have life carries on. But so many people are suffering in such worse ways, and we need to prepare ourselves better for that. I think we're going to see an impact on the future. My parents' generation, people I knew of that stage, were very much influenced by what happened during the Depression and during particularly World War II. Those two things really helped define their lives. And they changed their thought process because of those two things, even though they went in the background. And I think the same thing is going to happen here with COVID-19. This has been such a life-altering event for so many people. I think it will affect the way they approach things. I think it will make, I'm not so sure as some people are that we're going to have more pandemics like this, because I think there were some unusual characteristics that made this particularly difficult. You mentioned the asymptomatic transfer, the lack of testing, et cetera. But I think it makes people more risk averse, just in general. And I think it will have other implications like that on the people who have lived through that, including our children and grandchildren.
No, I agree. Although I do hope the devastation caused by this particular pandemic, especially in terms of lives and in terms of livelihoods, has been so vast that I hope this will be an awakening with an infinitesimal amount of what's been lost to the economy, with an infinitesimal amount of the value that's been destroyed in financial markets, the jobs that have been lost, the damage to the economy. You would fund a robust, permanent international capability for preparedness and response. Because right now we live dangerously. The analogy I have, this is as if every time there's a fire, once we put the fire out, we dismantle the fire department. We let go of the firemen and firewomen, we sell the trucks, and then when the next fire comes, we start again trying to see if we can get the equipment and bring in the people and train them. We need a permanent response. And it would really cost nothing compared to what's been lost to the economy. And of course, the human suffering, which is unquantifiable, to actually put up a permanent capability for response that would include technological platforms. It would include a rapid response force. We live in an interconnected world. Not every country in the world has the capabilities of a CDC. We need to be able to deploy, a sort of NATO for public health, that rapid response forces that would be able to contain wherever the next pandemic emerges and stop it from spreading throughout the world. It's got to be a very different global public health scene than the one we have now.
Well, we're always very good at closing the barn door after the horses have left. And I'm assuming that once again, we will put in place much more robust systems to prepare ourselves. But I also think we need to understand better the trade-offs. And I think as a country, and as in fact most countries, there wasn't a consistent effort and there wasn't any balancing. It was sort of all or nothing. We either have to take every piece as it comes and each one individually has to be dealt with, or we just have to deal and try and solve it all. To use your fire analogy, there are times when, if you have a fire, and of course, we're looking at these horrific fires in California and Oregon. One way is, it used to be that people would attack a fire by saying, there's the fire, let's rush in and go after the heart of the fire. And today we've learned that sometimes the best way to do it is let it burn a little bit and build fire backfires or fire breaks. And so we're not trying to save every single tree in the forest. And that makes it a much more effective response. And I think we did this in such a series of knee-jerk reactions, not just the United States, around the world. And I think a much more thoughtful and balanced approach would have probably done a better job of controlling this, and also done it without so much pain and suffering to people around the world.
Yes, absolutely. I think, obviously with any new pandemic, there's uncertainty by definition. It's the first time humans are encountering this particular virus. That's why it's called a novel pathogen. So we learn as we go, and there's been a lot of learning happening, but that always means that the early stages of the response is going to be much more efficient. And what we have learned is, yes, there's the technological, science-driven solution, and then there's the societal response. And that's why communication is as important as the technology. And there's also a science to communication. It's not that is not science-driven, it's also science-driven. But it's more the science of human behavior. And I think part of the issue here has been equivocal communication, inconsistent communication, contradictory communication. Across the world, we have seen the spectacle of that defective. Actually, the countries that have done the best, one of the characteristics is they have had the political leadership be very consistent. To me, for example, the politicization of the use of the face cover is one of the tragedies of this pandemic. It should have never been led to go that way. This is a public health measure. I'm as strong a defendant of civil liberties as anyone. But this is not about constraining civil liberty. This is the same reason why we don't allow people who are drunk to drive. That protects them, but it mostly protects everybody else. And wearing masks is that kind of measure.
It really is sad when you think that a lot of the steps that we took that were so painful probably wouldn't have been necessary if just from an early stage we just all wore masks in public. I think even the CDC and Dr. Fauci have come out a couple of times and said, if we had understood this, we could have done this better. And so we have to learn from this. I think we will learn from this. Nobody is talking about another massive shutdown as we went through last spring. And the technology, it really is, it's wonderful to see the technology of testing, the speed of the vaccines, which is just unheard of in history. Also the doctors, the hospitals have gotten so much better at treating the disease. So it's remarkable, as every month goes by, we see the death rate continue to fall. So I think all those things can make me fairly optimistic about where we're going. I think we all understand that while there may be a vaccine before the end of this year, and frankly, from what I've heard, I think it sounds likely, it won't be widely available. It'll take a while. It will first start out in the populations that need it most, the first responders, maybe teachers, maybe health workers, et cetera. And it will probably take months for it to really go through the supply chain and get available to everybody. And I think we'll have a good chance with the testing and with the medicines that have been coming out and the better forms of treatment. So I think we're going to see a much better control of this before the vaccines become available to everybody. And that actually makes me feel pretty good.
No, I share your optimism. I mean, in the midst of the tragedy, there are some silver linings. I think COVID-19 was not so much an initiator of change, but it's been a great accelerator of some trends that were already there. And I think it's crucial that we start thinking now about the future, so that when the public health part of this crisis is over, we don't just go back to the old normal, or we don't even think of a new normal, but a better normal. And I mean, some changes I think will be irreversible. I see it in higher education. I mean, this prompted the most massive migration from traditional instruction to the use of technology, of online technology. We had been trying to promote that because, you know, those technologies had gotten so good that they could actually enhance instruction, but we always had resistance, mostly from faculty members. The pandemic forced a massive change, unprecedented in the history, and we've learned so much about how to do it better. I don't think we're going to go back to the way we used to teach. We'll probably find a good blend. Same thing in healthcare. I mean, at UHealth, we went from 1,000 telehealth visits a month to over 12,000 per day. I mean, just an amazing shift in the use of telemedicine. Yeah. And then, of course, the future of work, where we've all found areas of productivity when we have the ability to do so. As you said, not everyone has that situation, but it can greatly enhance productivity. I've enjoyed all these months without having to travel and doing a lot of my work remotely.
So I'm a little bit of a contrarian on this. I think that there's this what we call the recency phenomenon. So whatever's happening today, we think is going to continue. And if things are going in this direction, it will just continue in that direction. And there will be changes. But one of the ones that people talk about is the telecommuting, et cetera. And telecommuting is, as we've always known, has its good and its bad. A lot of people are saying, gee, this is really good. I don't have to spend all my time in traffic. I don't have to travel as much. I can be more productive. And so there's no question that that will have a lasting impact, that there'll be more people telecommuting. There'll be more flexibility in work schedules. There'll be more telemedicine. Those kinds of things, it will grow. But I'm not a believer that it is going to be as transformational as it is, because we miss something here. There is something fundamentally different about talking to you over even these video conferences, and we both have the best technology that's available. But there's something different about doing that than doing it face-to-face over a cup of coffee, although I've been having my coffee while we're going. I think you'll see more of it. It will cause a change. But I think the idea that this is now a new normal, I just don't think it is. I hope it's not, because I believe that a lot of great thoughts come out of serendipity, come out of collaboration, come out of informal dialogues. And it's hard to have the same kind of informal dialogue, particularly amongst a group of people. So I'm a little bit of a contrarian on that. I think some of the things will go back to the way they were and should. I'm desperately looking forward to less travel. So from a business point of view, that's there. But I also am desperately looking forward to the informal time that I see somebody in the hallway or in a meeting room.
No, I agree. And I think what this will force us is to find that equilibrium. I completely agree. You know, it's very interesting for us. We had to migrate in the spring semester, and decades of resistance were overcome. But then when it came to our plans in the fall, and you know very well, Richard, as you are a very valued member of our board of trustees at the university and the former chair, we did a very careful analysis to think about whether we should reopen in person. And I mean, being my professional field, you know, I've spent countless hours trying to figure out a plan where we could actually be able to bring the students back safely, students and faculty. Because when we asked, it's exactly what you're saying. Having spent almost more than half of the previous semester online, most of our students were telling us we can't face the idea of another semester like that. So what we did was we said, let's work. It actually would be easier for us as a university just to say, let's not open. Let's just let students continue on the online. But the clamor was huge. In fact, what we did is we gave the choice to the students. Obviously, any student who has an underlying medical condition that's a risk factor, we told them you can't come. You should be fully remote, at least for the remaining of this academic year. But for the others, we gave them the choice. And the response was very clear. 75% of our students decided to come on campus. And it has put the university to the test. Can we do that in a responsible and safe way? So far, right now, a month and a half into the semester, it is proving that it can be done. And I'm not letting our guard down. This could change any minute. But we've invested literally millions of dollars in restructuring classrooms to keep physical distance. We've made the use of face masks mandatory, indoors and outdoors, in any public gathering. And we've invested a lot in testing. And the testing and tracing has been the key. But there is that craving for that human connection. And I hope what comes out of this is a better understanding of the blend between the exploitation of the advantages that technology does have with the need for human connection, and that we will be able to then come out into a better future.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think that I think culture is so important, and culture is informal. It's not something that one can dictate. Now, a university, I've always said, you've always said, an important element of it is the cultural interaction, the socialization, the ability of people to learn to work independently and live independently, and work collaboratively. And I think that's particularly true of a university. I can't imagine being a freshman at a university and trying to do it online. It loses the whole experience. And the same thing is true, I think, in business, and I think the same thing is true in society as a whole. I think culture is so important, and every organization, every entity has a unique culture. I think the university culture, very powerful, very strong, but it comes not just from classroom work, but from the interaction, the socialization, the opportunity to be together. A business is very social. There's a very cultural aspect to every business, and you have in every business you have a sense of what that is. At Royal Caribbean, I'm fortunate. Probably the dominant feature of our culture is the passion people bring to their work and their desire for innovation, and that comes from social interaction. And in our society as a whole, we need it. I mean, not being able, you and I are in the vulnerable group, so we're not going to be able to go to the kinds of activities we'd like. I think Temple Beth Am has been an amazing place for our culture to thrive and for us to live and work and be together with others of similar inclination. And the fact that so much of it is now just online, that's really sad. I can't wait to get back. And I think when people are focusing on the steps that are needed to protect people, there's been a little too much polarization. It's either I have to do everything I can to protect contagion, and I don't care what the consequences are to society, or I only care what the consequences are to society, and I don't care about how many people are infected. And we need to find that balance because both are devastating.
We faced that decision or that situation when we were pondering the decision whether to open in person or not. And a lot of this pandemic has been driven by some false dilemmas. And one of them in the higher education debate was the notion that if you open campus, that was all risk. And if you kept people at home, that was zero risk. And instead, we realized that there was a risk for health of continuing to keep students confined, mental health, physical health even. But also, many of the students had moved out of their parents' apartments. They were going to come literally and be around, surrounding the university, no matter what we did in terms of whether we opened or not. And I just couldn't imagine a situation where we would have students literally living across the street from the university, but we wouldn't allow them on campus. And as it turns out, we figured that campus was probably one of the safest places that students could be at. Because if students spend a substantial amount of their day, they're physically distanced, everyone is wearing a mask, they're exposed to constant education and messaging about healthy behaviors. We've created a figure of public health ambassadors to exercise positive peer pressure. There are 70 students who go around and are educating their peers. If students could spend a substantial part of the day in that environment, that would be safer than just letting them be literally across the street in apartments with no supervision, with no educational opportunity. And it's happened to be true. I mean, we've had a few cases, and we always expected there would be cases, but the vast majority come from social interactions off campus. With our tracing, we haven't been able to trace one single case of transmission in a classroom, not one. And it shows that if you do things the right way, and obviously this applies to business, I'm sure you're going through this similar analysis, you can actually bring the economy back in a safe way and get away from that other false dichotomy that either we activate the economy or we protect health. You can do the two things. They have to be synergistic goals.
Yeah, and I think that kind of brings us back to the point that we need to look both at the terrible impact this has on people who get the disease, many who suffer from it, and so many who have died from it. And we have to be very focused on that. But we also have to understand the consequences on society, which are really quite serious. And we've seen that at U Health. We've seen that in the number of people who have not had treatments for even some things like breast cancer and other kinds of serious disease. And we see it in business. You know, people tend to focus on the larger companies, and because Royal Caribbean is a public company, that gives us access to public capital markets, which help us through. But the real growth in the United States is often driven not by the large companies, but by the thousands and thousands of small or medium-sized enterprises, which are innovative and moving us forward as a nation and as businesses and as an economy. And if those people are really suffering, you know, my business education teaches me, I studied long enough to understand that it's very hard to have a successful business with zero revenue. I did learn that lesson, and that's what so many businesses are having to do today. And if we can't get these restaurants back into operation, these smaller enterprises, it's going to have lasting impacts on so many people. So we need to find a way to use the innovation that America is so famous for, to use the improvement in technology and in different ways of dealing with it. And frankly, some more acceptance of risk, because that's part of finding the balance. We cannot have zero risk in anything we do. And so we're always making a balance. Usually we make it unconsciously or just without a lot of thought. But here we need to make some conscious decisions over what we are willing to do to reduce risk and how to find that balance. And I think that's what we're beginning to get a little bit better at. I'm really hopeful and it does make me optimistic, as people understand it. We are seeing better compliance with face coverings, which are amazingly effective in dealing with this. The head of the CDC said he actually thought they were more effective than a vaccine. I think he was using a little hyperbole, but his point's a good one. If we all just wore face masks, that would dramatically reduce the risk, and we could move on very much more quickly.
Yes, I agree. And in addition, again, from an educational institution point of view, I think this is a great opportunity in civic education, because it's taught us clearly that we can only protect ourselves if we participate in protecting others. This is one of those precious moments in which our individual interest coincides with the interest of the community. And I think at a time when we're so divided over so many things, finding that point where we all work together to contain a common threat. And by doing that, we protect ourselves, but we protect others. We engage in a process of mutuality, of responsibility. We're mutually responsible for others. And I hope that's another one of the lessons that can remain, the importance of that kind of social cohesion in dealing not just with this crisis, but also as we try to come back and reactivate the economy, and certainly for the social crisis that's been there, particularly around issues of racial justice. That same mindset is going to be required.
Well, one good example of that, actually, I thought I was quite pleased when Pfizer announced that it was expanding the number of people in its phase 3 trials from 30,000 to 44,000. And the reason they gave, or one of the main reasons they gave, was because the disease has impacted people of color more than Caucasians. The reason they gave was by expanding the size of their trial, they would be able to be more inclusive of who the vaccine was being tested on. And I thought that was a very good statement of the kind of things that we need to be doing in our country. And so, as you say, hopefully there will be some silver lining. I'm not going to say a lot of good will come of this, but there will be some aspects of silver lining to come out of this.
Yes, and as we wrap up, I think, as you said at the beginning, usually after big catastrophes, humanity has responded. There's been always an opportunity for a reset. As you were mentioning about your parents' generation, I think we're going to be in a similar situation. So it's up to us to start doing that and that reflection right now. What is it that we want differently? To me, I draw a number of lessons. One is this: the need, what we've been talking about, the need for a balanced approach and the need for more social cohesion in our behaviors. The idea that we protect each other better when we protect everyone and we include everyone. I think another lesson is that global problems require global solutions. I hope we don't go down the path of saying, you see, the result to this is that we need to isolate ourselves. There's all these threats out there. Let's just become isolated. Let's keep the other people outside and we won't have the threat of pandemics. That's an illusion. We live in an interconnected planet, and you can only deal with global problems through global solutions, through global action, through cooperation among nations. The third lesson for me is the importance of science. We have seen both science driving policy, science driving human behavior, and science driving the technological solutions, tests, drugs, vaccines. And lastly, to me, the last big lesson is I hope we learn that to take better care of our planet. This sort of zoonosis, which is what they are, diseases that start in animals and then jump the species barrier, are a direct result of the way one animal species, which is us, is invading other habitats in an unsustainable way. And the way we're also dealing with the production and trade of food, particularly livestock, in unsanitary, crowded, inhumane conditions for the animals and putting humans at a huge risk. Those wet markets that are so common in many parts of the world, those crowded conditions where we raise chickens and other animals, that's where you create the conditions for those viruses jumping the species barrier. So just like with climate change, this should be a wake-up call that we need to relate in more sustainable ways to our planet if we want to avoid other disasters like this one.
I agree with all that you're saying about what we need to do going forward, but I also hope that we don't just have a knee-jerk reaction and, in effect, fight the last war. We want to close the barn door after the horses have left. Okay, that's all right. But maybe we should consider whether we need a new kind of structure. I don't think we want to build another Maginot Line to protect us because we're still fighting World War I when the real risk is World War II. And I think we should learn from this, but we should learn to look at it holistically. And I'm optimistic we'll get through this crisis before too long and before too much more suffering. But I do hope that we understand better what we need to do to protect our planet, to protect our health, and that we do so with a forward-thinking mind and not just a repetitive mind. So I guess with that, we should just say Happy New Year. May you have an easy and meaningful fast. And thank you for a chance to chat about this interesting topic.
Thank you, Richard. I've enjoyed it. And thank you to Rabbi Jeremy Baratz for having invited the two of us. It's always a great privilege to be part of this great community.